Season 1 of Narcos Mexico follows DEA agent Kiki Camarena as he moves his family from California to his new post in Guadalajara. Kiki is ambitious and wants to bring real justice to the drug trade in Mexico, but he quickly learns that there are many roadblocks in the Mexican government preventing him from doing his job correctly. Just as Kiki is arriving in Guadalajara to make a name for himself, so too is Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo. Felix is an ex-cop from Sinaloa working under Pedro Aviles, but the Mexican government is constantly interfering with their enterprise, and Felix has his eyes set much higher. He convinces his boss to let him travel to Guadalajara to unify the various plazas and form the first Mexican cartel. And when Aviles lacks the forward-thinking vision of Felix and tries to have him killed for stepping out of line, Felix has his former boss killed. Felix's Guadalajara Cartel, also known as the Federation, not only had all of the various plazas under its control, but also was in the pockets of important figures in the government and law enforcement, making the whole organization practically untouchable. Helping Felix lead this cartel was his longtime friend and partner Rafa, and Aviles' old partner Don Nato. Rafa has developed a seedless strain of marijuana, making it lighter and easier to transport. With the resources of the cartel behind him, Rafa is able to plant a marijuana super farm covering over 1,300 acres in the Mexican desert. There were three main plazas in the Guadalajara cartel: Sinaloa, Juarez, and Tijuana. In Sinaloa, Felix appointed Palma as leader with Chapo and Cochiloco working under him. Juarez was led by Pablo Acosta, but Felix sent Don Nato's nephew Amado to help run things. And in Tijuana, Felix passed up his old friend Isabella to let Benjamin Arellano Felix and his family run the plaza. With the power of his super farm and his network of aligned plaza leaders, Felix Gallardo quickly becomes known as the Godfather and begins drawing the attention of the DEA. But that doesn't stop his plans for expansion, and he soon got his eyes set on an even more lucrative drug: cocaine. Felix heads to Colombia to meet with both the Cali cartel and the Medellin cartel run by Pablo Escobar, and cuts a deal to use his resources to transport their cocaine into the US. This deal would bring in billions of dollars for the Federation. But it's not all smooth sailing for Felix, as he is constantly having to solve problems created by his associates. Rafa becomes addicted to cocaine and grows increasingly frustrated and erratic as Felix's focus shifts from Rafa's weed to the Colombians' cocaine. Rafa even forms a violent rivalry against Amado. When Kiki Camarena and his fellow DEA agents, aided by the Mexican government, raid Rafa's marijuana plantation and burn the whole thing to the ground, the conflict between the cartel and the DEA escalates into an all-out war. Felix wants to move past losing the marijuana crop, knowing the real money was now in the cocaine deal anyway, but his allies in the government pressure him into retaliating by kidnapping Kiki. When Felix refuses, not wanting to escalate a war with the US government, El Azul, the Director General of Mexico's corrupt Federal Security Directorate, or DFS, turns to Rafa to get the job done. Rafa, on a cocaine bender and feeling resentful that his farm was destroyed, agrees to the plan. And so DEA agent Kiki Camarena is kidnapped by the cartel and tortured for information on what intel the US had on the Federation. Knowing his government allies had turned on him, Felix implores Rafa and Don Nato to flee. Hoping to make peace on all sides, Felix makes the decision to tip off the DEA to Rafa's whereabouts. This leads to Rafa's arrest, which Felix hopes will also lead to Kiki's rescue and put an end to the DEA's manhunt. Felix then decides to retreat back to Sinaloa and asks the governor, a father figure to him, to aid in his protection. The governor agrees for a steep price, but later betrays Felix to the authorities. Kiki's boss of the DEA's Guadalajaran bureau, Jaime, is doing everything in his power to rescue his friend, but at every step in the process, corrupt members of Mexican government and law enforcement impede his attempts. After taking the obstruction to the media and making international headlines, Jaime is finally able to make progress, but unfortunately it's too late and Kiki's dead body is discovered. When law enforcement goes to arrest Felix following the Sinaloan governor's tip-off, Jaime is forced to sit on the sidelines after being deemed too emotional. And so when Felix's hideout is raided, it's not Jaime or any other DEA agent making the arrest, it's the Mexican police led by Comandante Calderoni, who Felix is able to cut a deal with. We learn that Felix had ultimately decided to take part in the torturing and killing of Kiki Camarena, which led to a lot of incriminating evidence. Felix offered up enough evidence to put away ally Don Nato, while he kept evidence he could use to blackmail Mexican government officials, re-solidifying his position as the head of the Guadalajara Cartel. And so, Felix escapes arrest and regains the backing of his corrupt political allies. In Felix's weakened position, old friend Isabella had tried to stage a coup to have Tijuana leader Benjamin Felix take over the entire Federation Federation. But the newly re-empowered Felix Gallardo arrives to crash the meeting, dismisses Isabella, and reclaims ultimate control. As Season 1 comes to a close, a defeated Jaime is set to return to America, but before he leaves he is reassured that Kiki Camarena's death would not go unpunished, and the Mexican drug war would be played by very different rules moving forward. The DEA was beginning Operation Leyenda and sending a special task force led by Agent Walt Breslin, previously the unseen narrator of the first season, to avenge Kiki's death and bring down the Guadalajara Cartel once and for all. In Season 2 of Narcos Mexico, Felix Gallardo has his eyes set on further expansion. Not content to simply transport the Colombians' cocaine, he wants to push them out and get into selling the product himself. But that plan was a lot easier said than done, especially when he has to deal with the constant infighting of his plaza leaders. In Juarez, Amado is forced to play a reluctant babysitter to Pablo Acosta, who is shirking his leadership duties to play house with an American woman named Mimi and going off on honorable revenge missions against a rival. Amado manages to mostly keep Acosta in line, but Acosta's head is no longer in the game and he's searching for a way out. In Sinaloa, tired of having to deal with the Arellano Felix family in Tijuana, Chapo devises his own route to traffic drugs across the US-Mexico border. Buying a warehouse in Mexico and a plot of land in America, Chapo works on an underground tunnel that would cut out any business ties the Sinaloans would need with Tijuana. And in Tijuana, Benjamin's sister Enedina strikes up a secret deal with Isabella to use the Tijuana Plaza's resources to traffic their own supply of cocaine into America. Meanwhile, Benjamin is constantly bickering with Sinaloa heads Palma, Cochiloco, and Chapo, eventually escalating into a violent and deadly tit-for-tat, which includes murders on both sides and the destruction of Chapo's underground tunnel. Eventually, Benjamin pressures Felix into allowing him to make the ultimate power move, ordering the death of Cochiloco. And it's not just the plaza leaders that are causing problems for Felix Gallardo's Federation expansion plans. DEA agent Walt Breslin and his team from Operation Leyenda are utilizing any means necessary to take Felix down. Eventually, they managed to capture Ruben Zuno Arce, the owner of the house Kiki Camarena was murdered in. Arce had incriminating dirt on Felix that put him away for good, but he refuses to testify in front of the grand jury. This loss puts an official into Operation Leyenda, but Walt and his team are given the go-ahead to continue their mission off-book. Walt's next move is offering Pablo Acosta a plea deal that would allow him to enter the witness protection program in America with Mimi, but unfortunately for him, Acosta is also a target of the FBI and DFS, who kill Acosta in an assault on the small town he was hiding in. With his plaza heads constantly at odds and the DEA closing in on him, Felix has to get creative and ruthless in his moves throughout Season 2. When Palma is caught scheming behind Felix's back following the death of Cochiloco, Felix calls for Palma's death. The Sinaloan leader manages to evade the hit, but his wife and children aren't as lucky. When a new progressive presidential candidate wins the Mexican election, Felix has his men storm the polling stations to alter the votes in favor of Felix's political allies. Felix's plans to push the Colombians out of the cocaine business backfires when they cut a deal with Guerra, leader of the Gulf region, to transport their supply. To keep the Colombians happy, Felix vastly overcompensates and promises to transport as much cocaine as the Colombians could give him, a sum totaling about 70 tons. Walt's team plans a raid on the 70-ton shipment of cocaine, but when they arrive at the airstrip, they discover they've fallen into a trap. Most of Walt's team is killed, and he barely escapes with his own life. Felix manages to successfully transport the 70 tons of cocaine, and Walt's failure leads to him being reassigned back to America. Feeling back on top, Felix tips off law enforcement in California about the location of 20 tons of Colombian coke. This leads to the largest cocaine seizure in history. This weakens the Colombians enough for Felix to finally get what he's been after all season, his own supply of cocaine to sell. But that's where Felix's successes come to an end. At a meeting with the plaza heads to inform them of the new cocaine deal, they all instead withdraw from the Federation. The deaths of Cochiloco and Palma's family, and Felix's continuing power trips had pushed them all over the edge. And so the Federation disbanded, with Benjamin and the Arellano Felix family continuing to run Tijuana, Palma, Azul, and Chapo running Sinaloa, Amado and Aguilar running Juarez, and Guerra and his family running the Gulf. With the disbandment of the Federation, Felix had lost all of his power. Looking to appease the American government, Mexican officials were finally on board to arrest Felix, and he no longer had the power to stop them. And so, Felix Gallardo was finally taken into custody. As the season comes to a close, Walt Breslin, now working under Jaime in the DEA's El Paso office, pays a visit to Felix in prison. And though the leader of the Guadalajara Cartel was now finally behind bars, Felix assured Walt that the worst was yet to come. With no leader keeping the various cartel heads in line, chaos would ensue, and that chaos would lead to the Mexican drug war. And that's everything that's happened in Narcos Mexico. Let me know some of your favorite moments from this series in the comments below. What are you most looking forward to seeing in the final season? Like this video if you found it helpful, subscribe to this channel for more content like it, and that does it for me in this one, but I'll see you in the next one.